Hello and welcome back to Papeles de Eli B. I'm Eli and I am a stationery enthusiast and addict, which is what my channel is all about at the moment. And what I want to share with y'all today is that I have a very exciting new professional goal that I've set for myself. And also, I've come across a tool that I decided to acquire to help me achieve a more emotional, personal goal for myself. And what is a goal if not just the most perfect excuse to use your stationery or even buy some new stationery? As you could probably tell from the shot of my iPad, I want to become certified to become a court interpreter. I already work as a Spanish interpreter through an agency and go to a lot of medical appointments and schools, sometimes job sites. But translating for the courts is a whole different beast that requires so much more knowledge of Spanish than I already have. But I'll share a little more on that later when I share with you what I bought in order to help me study, which on its own was not enough for me to get to the $40 free shipping threshold on Yoseka's website, so of course I had to get a few other little stationery goodies. One of those things being this Midori MD notebook. I only had a few pages left in my morning pages journal at the time of making this order, so I just had to see what all the hype was about with these incredibly simple notebooks. A lot of people say that they have the best paper ever, which honestly, I can see why. I've really been enjoying my time in this notebook. I would even go as far as to say that if I had to choose one book to repurchase over and over for my morning pages for the rest of my life, I think this would be it. Hobonichi notebooks also feel really nice, but I feel like they would take too long to fill up, and I just don't like to spend too long in one notebook for morning pages. I would prefer to go through at least 2 notebooks in a year, and I do predict that this notebook will get me through about 4 to 6 months, I think. Now we're looking at the only other thing I got in my order aside from the flashcards, which is a collaboration between Furukawa Shiko and Shachihara for this really beautiful rotating decorating stamp. I just thought it was really cute, honestly. I like having so many options for decoration within a really small form factor and a really elegant form factor too because of this really nice wooden handle. I do have a couple of rotating decorating stamps already in my collection, but they're all self-inking and they're all plastic and from Midori, so I'm excited to introduce my first Shachihara stamp to my collection, my first stamp with this kind of form factor with the metal and wood, and a new art style to my decoration possibilities. And I already gave it away, but here are the stars of the show, the secret weapon study tool that are going to transform me into a bona fide, court certified interpreter, the Reimei word cards. I had seen these under the new arrivals in Yoseka's website before I needed them for anything, and I almost wish that I had something to study for because they just look kind of aesthetic and I wanted to use them and fill them out. I mean, aside from being aesthetic, I just think it's cool that so many flashcards fit on one ring. I just wish that Yoseka had refills. I don't know where to find refills other than cutting down flashcards myself, which I'm not a fan of. Plus, I love that they offer 3 different sizes to choose the one that best fits your needs. And I just know that they have super cool memorization technology that I have not tried to explore yet. Like, I haven't recorded that part yet, but I'm going to try to explore it later because I just think I would be doing these cards a disservice if I were to show them to you and not show that part. I really wasn't expecting to find such a good reason to use these cards so soon after I discovered them, but I was very excited about it, and that's why I'm swatching all of my black pens here. I really wanted to find the darkest one for the words and the next darkest one for the definitions because I thought that would lead to the best readability. Like I was saying earlier, interpreting for the courts would require so much more knowledge of Spanish than what I currently have. I spent most of my life thinking that I was a native Spanish speaker because that was my first language and it's what I've always spoken with my parents. But I just recently learned through Reddit, of all places, that I am a heritage speaker of Spanish. Heritage speakers of a language learn it through exposure from their parents and other family members, but they grow up in a different country than their parents or their grandparents or whoever they're learning this language from. And the country that they grow up in doesn't have this language as an official language, therefore they don't learn it formally, like in a school setting. So we can tend to make a few mistakes here and there. I mean, think about all the little nuances of English that you learned in school. Heritage speakers of a language don't learn those little things in school, and since they don't really impact your ability to get a message across, a lot of times they just never have reason to fix those little things. I mean, I literally speak Spanish for my job. It is a requirement for me to know Spanish. I am interpreting things from English into Spanish, and my Spanish is far from perfect, and I make mistakes all the time. But I'm able to get a message across quickly and effectively on the spot, so it doesn't really matter. The agency that I started interpreting with has always given me a very chill vibe, but since I started recording the audio for this video, I have actually started onboarding with an additional agency that I will also be working with now, and they definitely position themselves as very serious. They feel very corporate. They're very upfront about expecting a lot from their interpreters and having super high expectations and only wanting to provide the best quality interpretation. And even they are like, we don't expect our interpreters to be perfect. We expect our interpreters to constantly be learning on the job. Every day, something new. Now, when it comes to interpreting for the courts, I'll be honest in that I haven't looked too deeply into exactly what it would look like, but I'm pretty confident that they wouldn't let me be up there with my phone to look up a word that I don't know, like I'm able to do with my current interpreting jobs. And I think because of the seriousness and officialness of the legal system, that they might be less forgiving with those tiny little grammatical errors that I was talking about earlier as well. I'm currently watching La Fea Más Bella, which is a novela that I used to watch with my mom. She watched and still watches so many novelas, and that was the only one that I ever really got into and watched with her. And it's super special because Jaime Camil is in it. I'm pretty sure I saw him on my TV screen for other things that she would watch as well, but it's just so special that he's in the only novela that I ever loved, and then he was later in Jane the Virgin, and I got to love him there as well, but along with a US American audience and in English. That's super cool for me. So I'm watching that in hopes that correct Spanish grammar and all that will be more reflexive to me. Like if I take in more Spanish speaking media, I hope that will happen. That's not the only thing that I'm taking in. It's just kind of like the main thing. And I really love that it's set in a corporate Mexican space because I've only ever spoken with my Mexican family in a very obviously familiar and casual way. So to hear how people would speak more in a business setting in Mexico, that's really great for me. But the main thing that I'm worried about and where my flashcards come in is that there is so much legal jargon that I have to learn, not just in Spanish, but in English. To become a certified court interpreter, I would have to pass a written exam and an oral exam, and some of it would cover professional ethics and the role of the court interpreter. And somewhat surprisingly, at least to me, is that I would have to demonstrate a broad knowledge of idioms in English. But also, in this resource guide for court interpreters that I found on supremecourt.ohio.gov, there are so many glossaries. Again, in Spanish and in English, because there are just a lot of words that are used in court that are specific to the courts and that you would never have to learn as I don't know what you would call it, pedestrian, as a regular, schmegular person that does not work in the courts. I just counted it. There are literally 19 glossaries in this resource guide. but I started with two that looked the most comprehensive and helpful. One of them is this English Spanish glossary with words or phrases that are commonly said in the courts in English and their Spanish equivalent, and that's it. I actually think that might have been more of a Spanish English legal dictionary. Now I'm questioning myself on what the difference between dictionary and glossary is, but I don't care enough to look it up. They're both labeled as English Spanish legal glossaries, but this other one that I picked out has the English word and its Spanish equivalent and the definitions in English and in Spanish. So the one that only has the Spanish equivalents, it has words in English that are often used in the courts and are easily understandable by anybody who knows English, but if they're working as an interpreter, they might find it difficult to translate those words directly into Spanish. Things like allegations set forth, or anything seized, or approved method of sale. Like, those are things that I don't need definitions for. But the one with definitions has words that I would be lost on without those definitions, like abatement of action, or abrogate, or adhesion contracts. And also some words that are easy to understand but have a very specific definition or use in court, like abandonment or abuse, accessory, accomplice, accord, things like that. So for the glossary without the definitions, I got the standard word cards. I didn't go for the mini because a lot of them had phrases rather than singular words, and a lot of the English words had a long list of Spanish equivalents that were acceptable. And then for the glossary with the definitions, I chose the wide word cards, and for most of them they worked. For some of them, the space was really tight. Some of the words and definitions were so long that I just completely left them out of my flashcards, and I figured I would find a way to study and memorize them later. But there are so many words that even with the ones that I left out, or some of the ones that I combined, like appellant and appellate, I used up the whole ring of flashcards and only got to Ballard motion. The words are organized alphabetically, and I got to BA. BA. And I used the whole ring. So the other goal that I mentioned, the emotional goal, has to do with managing my BPD. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder about 3.5 years ago after a mental health crisis that landed me in the hospital, which I'm singing because it makes it a lot less scary. Honestly, after the worst of it had passed and after the antipsychotics did their thing, there were a few times that I wondered if the diagnosis was correct, because I thought that I felt pretty normal. But a few things that I've come to realize since then is that after that incident, I really designed my life to eliminate as much stress as I possibly could, because I was just terrified of what my brain would do if I ever got back to the levels of stress that wound me up in the hospital. B, I have a terrible memory for intense emotional moments. In the midst of me wondering whether I actually had BPD or not, I probably had a lot of disproportionate emotional reactions to things that I just completely forgot about. Because for me, it's like those feelings stay in that moment and don't affect me later on. Like, I can have an absolute freak out one day, and the next day, or maybe even later in that same day, it's as if it never happened. And C, ever since I moved back to my hometown, my BPD has been flaring up, girl. It's just really triggering for me here for a lot of reasons, and I would love to get therapy, but I'm uninsured and I can't afford it. However, I was scrolling on a subreddit for people with BPD, and I came across this book. Looking into it, it was really highly rated and highly recommended for people who suffer with BPD who are unable to access therapy, specifically dialectical behavioral therapy, which was developed specifically with people with BPD in mind. The woman The brilliant therapist who developed it had BPD herself. And of course, it can be a useful tool for anybody who struggles with overwhelming emotions. People who may have symptoms of BPD but don't really reach the clinical threshold. I hope it goes without saying you don't need to have BPD to go through and benefit from this book. So I had to get it, and obviously it is a paper product, which means that I need the perfect writing utensil to go with it. So I went with this Pilot Friction multi-pen that I've had for quite a bit, and this Pilot Friction highlighter that was one of the many stationery goodies that my husband got me during our first Christmas as a married couple. I haven't gotten very much use out of it, but I love the thought of going through this book and highlighting things that I want to remember with a utensil that somebody whom I love very much got for me. I also haven't gotten very much use out of the Pilot Friction multi-pen that I got myself, but I like the thought of it giving my writing a more official look because that's what pen does for me over pencil, while at the same time giving me the flexibility to erase anything if I ever want to change my answer. Or maybe I go through it multiple times and something that I once wrote no longer resonates with me. Plus, the multiple colors could help me group certain concepts together or mark just like certain kind of information, or it could mark the passage of time as I go through it. Maybe I go through it once with one color and then I go through it again with a different color, because I do want this to be something that I return to over and over again throughout the years. Although, I'll be honest, it's not going too hot right now. I was having a moment and my husband put the book in front of me in an attempt to help me get through the moment. But because my moment was in response to something that he had said, I just saw it as adding insult to injury. And I got really pissed and I ripped out a bunch of pages from the book. I did later tearfully and regretfully pick them up and rearrange them in the book in the correct order, and they're still usable, so hopefully that's what I do, is use them and absorb some good information before I need to use it so that I can call upon it when it would be helpful. My husband and I finally got around to creating this vision board together, and I really like the idea of using this Kokuyo dot liner tack. It's basically a repositionable glue tape so that we could move things around if we needed to ever, move things. Sometimes visions change. Hello, can you focus? But as you can see, it's really weak, at least for this combination of materials. So I've decided to re-stick things down where need be with this Kokuyo outliner Petite More, which I got just because it's really little. And I can't remember exactly the stickability of it, if you will. I feel like it's not really marketed as repositionable, but I think I remember seeing a video about how you can literally erase it with an eraser. Essentially, it's not a permanent one, but it's also not restickable. So it should do the job better than this one, and hopefully we won't have the same problem, because I had things all the way fall off. So we're just going to restick that right now. What's up, y'all? I just tried shooting this on my regular camera, but I think my SD card is not fast enough or capable enough to add more video on top of it than it's already holding, even though it's 1 TB, and I definitely don't have 1 TB of stuff on there. I'm using my phone now. I'm trying to get this done really quickly because the whole video is already done and edited. I just got to do this quick part so fast. So I enlisted the help of a friend. Say hello. Alright, so Yoseka has a full video on this Plus study liner, and essentially it helps you memorize things. I'm going to use what I think the most obvious use case is as an example. Words and the definitions of those words. So you can see that if you cover whatever you cover with the study liner, you can still see it. But now you can't. And that's how it helps you memorize things. And if I hadn't ordered this before I ordered the word cards, I mean like weeks before I ordered the word cards, these were not related orders for me. But without this, I would have never known what they were talking about back here. And this looks like a regular highlighter, so I don't know if they have this in the form of a regular highlighter, but I tried it with a regular highlighter and it doesn't work. This is a mild liner, and as you can see, it's still visible, but oh my goodness, oh, that makes it so much easier. I was thinking that you just had to I'm literally discovering this as I'm making this. I was thinking you just had to, like, you know, go like that and keep the cards covered with the red card by doing it like that, but you can just very easily remove it. It has a slit. Don't want to be too rough with it now. And now, you know, you can move it around to whatever card you need to move it around to, which is awesome because I realized, I was wondering if the green also had the same effect, but it doesn't. You can still see the word. But now you can't. This is awesome for me, specifically just with this stack of word cards. I think I'm going to use the study liner for all of the Spanish words and try to memorize them to the English word like that. And then for everything else, I'm just going to use them like regular flashcards, you know? I don't need this to hide the back from the front, which is how most of the memorization is going to happen, especially with these that only have, you know, one language on one side and its equivalent on the other side. I feel like my words are getting so jumbled because I'm trying to go so fast. But yeah, that's that. Thank you for watching.